The night was supposed to be silent. Nights like this usually were thick, heavy, and full of secrets the Empire pretended not to notice. But tonight, silence had been ripped apart. The arenum luporum was trembling with the kind of unrest that only happened when someone escaped the chains meant to keep the wolves in line. And she was the reason for that unrest. Every step she took echoed through the underground corridors like a desperate warning. Her breath scraped against her throat, too sharp, too fast, too full of fear she didn't have time to unpack. She tasted iron. She tasted dust. She tasted the metallic hint of her own blood where she had bitten her cheek trying to stay quiet. The ash storm raging above the city had found its way into the tunnels, sifting down from cracks in the stone ceiling like the sky was shedding pieces of itself. Gray flakes clung to her hair, her lashes, the tears she fought back. Her ribs burned with every inhale. That wasn't new. Pain had been a companion for as long as she could remember. But the twisting ache in her ankle was a new enemy, one she didn't have time to negotiate with. She stumbled against a wall, palm scraping over rough stone, and forced herself forward again. Stopping wasn't an option. Not here. Not tonight. Not after everything the Empire had done. Above her, the deep tolling of the capital's bells rolled through the tunnels. They sounded ceremonial. Slow, grand, heavy. But she knew what they meant. Someone had rung the alarm. Someone had realized she was gone. And when the bells tolled like that, the entire city listened. Hunters listened. Guards listened. Anyone who wanted a piece of the Empire's reward listened. And they would all be coming for her. She swallowed down the panic rising in her chest. It tasted like smoke and old memories, memories she wished she could leave behind in the dirt. She passed the first archway, the one marked with a carved wolf skull. The place had once been a gladiator tunnel, long before it became a prison for shifters. Shadows clung to the cracks in the stone like they were alive. The walls still carried the ghosts of screams from centuries ago, the screams of cursed beasts forced to fight for the Empire's entertainment. The air held the same metallic scent it always had, blood, fear, and wet stone. Her footsteps slapped softly against the ground. Not loud. But loud enough for someone trained to listen. She slid behind a broken pillar, pressing her back against cold marble that had once belonged to a lavish arena balcony. This was where they displayed the strongest wolves, the ones too powerful to tame but too valuable to kill outright. She remembered standing here once, chains biting into her wrists, crowds staring at her like she was a creature carved from nightmare. Flash. The memory snapped over her vision. She saw herself standing on the auction block again, dust blowing across her skin, the sun harsh, the crowd loud. The priests chanting the warnings of her bloodline. The Empire officials trying to look fearless while they whispered that she was dangerous, unpredictable, a ticking threat to everything Roman order stood for. She remembered the way the chains dug into her bones until her hands went cold. The way people stepped back when she met their eyes, like even a glance from her could burn them alive. Back then, she had been a commodity. Tonight, she was a fugitive. She shut her eyes and forced the memory away. Not the time. Not the place. She needed to move. She needed. A low sound cut through the air. Not a growl. Not footsteps. Something softer. Intentional. Someone whispering her name. Her heart jolted into her throat. She didn't breathe. Didn't move. Didn't even blink. The sound didn't come from far away. It curled around her like a hand closing over her shoulder. How did they know her name? She had never told it to anyone here. Not freely. Not loudly. Not in a way that would allow someone to speak it into the dark like an intimate secret. Her chest tightened. Not the good kind of tight. The kind that made every instinct scream run. But running was harder now. Her ankle throbbed with every shift of weight. She pushed her back harder against the stone, biting down on a gasp as pain shot up her leg. The bells tolled again. Louder. Closer. Like the city itself was hunting her. She listened. Strained. Held still. Boots hit the ground somewhere behind her, several pairs, pounding fast, echoing through the corridors like approaching thunder. The guards were coming. Their voices bounced off the stone walls, sharp, irritated, confident. They expected to catch her quickly. They always expected that. They didn't believe anyone like her could outpace the Empire. She curled her fingers into a fist, grounding herself. But even her bones felt wrong. Hot. Not fever hot, something else. Something deeper. Like something inside her was trying to wake up. Silver heat. It had been there for years, hiding inside her like a secret too big to touch. Sometimes it flickered under her skin, little sparks that danced along her spine. Sometimes it pulsed in her palms like her blood was burning from the inside. But tonight it felt different. Stronger. Like it wanted out. She didn't know if it was her salvation or the thing that would finally destroy her. Because the Empire wasn't wrong about everything. If she ever shifted, if she ever let the beast in her bones fully rise, something catastrophic would follow. She didn't know what exactly. No one did. But the rumors were clear. The Empire would burn. The old gods would wake. The bloodline of the Silver Flame was not meant to live quietly. She drew in a sharp breath and forced herself to move again. Hiding wouldn't save her. Staying still would only shorten the time she had left. She pushed off the pillar and limped down the corridor, hand trailing along the stone for balance. The pain didn't matter. Not compared to the hands that would drag her back to the auction block if she slowed. She picked up speed. The tunnel grew darker. The ash storm outside made everything feel smothered, like the world was folding in on itself. Every exhale left her lightheaded. Every inhale tasted like dust and fear. Above her, distant thunder rolled through the city, except it wasn't thunder. It was the wind. Howling. Crying. Calling. It sounded like wolves begging the moon for mercy. She reached the end of the corridor, where the stone gave way to a deeper tunnel carved centuries ago. The air shifted, cooler, older, almost sacred. This was the part of the ruins people avoided. The tunnel where the cursed beasts had been kept. No one came here willingly. Not even guards. Not even priests. They said the walls still held the old enchantments, the ones meant to break spirits and control creatures the Empire feared. Perfect. She slipped into the darkness, letting it swallow her. The air hummed against her skin. The silver heat inside her pulsed in response, almost like recognition. She kept moving. Slow at first, then faster as she adjusted to the low light. Her breathing eased, just a little, even though her ribs still screamed. The walls were carved with old wolf sigils, teeth bared, claws out, eyes glowing with moonlight trapped in stone. Dust clung to the carvings. Spiderweb swayed with her passing. It felt like walking through the throat of a forgotten god. Another whisper echoed behind her. Not her name this time. Something else. Something in a language she didn't know but somehow understood. A language that brushed against her bones, warming the silver inside her. She stopped. Slowly turned. Nothing. No one. Just the ripple of old air moving through old magic. But the guards were still coming. She could hear them faintly, their footsteps growing sharper as they fanned out across the ruins. They were trained for this, trained to chase, to corner, to drag the runaway back in chains. She could imagine their faces already. Bored, irritated, confident they would win. She clenched her jaw and pushed forward. Her ankle buckled beneath her. Pain shot up her leg like lightning. She fell against the wall, catching herself with a choked cry. Tears spilled before she could stop them. Not from fear. Not from weakness. From exhaustion. From the weight of surviving one chase after another. From knowing that no matter how fast she ran, the Empire always found a way to tighten its grip. She pressed her forehead to the stone, trying to breathe around the pain. The wall was cold. A different kind of cold. Not lifeless, old. Ancient. It felt like it had been waiting for someone to touch it. And then it happened. The carved sigil beneath her hand warmed. Just a little. Enough to make her jerk back. She stared as faint silver light bled from the cracks in the carving, pulsing like a heartbeat. Her heartbeat. The silver in her bones rose again. Hotter, brighter, pushing at her skin like it wanted to burst free. She backed away, chest tight, mind racing. She didn't want this. Not now. Not here. Not when hunters were closing in. But the wall kept glowing. Another whisper floated through the tunnel. Closer this time. Softer. Almost tender. Her name. Again. She spun, heart pounding hard enough to bruise her ribs. Nothing. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Louder. Closer. She didn't have time to think. Didn't have time to question why the shadows kept whispering her name like they knew her. She pushed away from the glowing wall, ignoring the heat in her chest, and ran. The tunnel widened ahead. Broken pillars jutted from the floor like the bones of the arena itself. Ash drifted around her in slow spirals, carried in on the wind that slipped through cracks in the ceiling. The air tasted like storms. Like endings. Like beginnings she didn't ask for. She ducked behind another pillar, gasping for breath. Her palms shook. Her muscles trembled. Her ankle throbbed in time with her heartbeat. She pressed a hand over her mouth to muffle the sound of her breathing. The guards' voices grew louder, echoing through the tunnels as they argued about which path she took. She closed her eyes. Forced her breaths to slow, even though her lungs begged for air. If they found her here, it was over. She listened to the echo of their steps. Counted the rhythm. Mapped their movements in her mind. She had always been good at that, listening carefully, thinking fast, making decisions the Empire never planned for. The voices drifted away. She let her shoulders sag against the pillar. Not relief, just one borrowed moment. Then, from somewhere deep in the tunnel, someone whispered her name again. Not like a threat. Not like a warning. Soft. Familiar. Almost protective. Her pulse skipped. Someone else was down here. Someone who shouldn't know her name. Someone who wasn't afraid to speak into the dark. And somehow, she knew that whoever whispered was not one of the guards. She opened her eyes, gaze tracking the shadows ahead. Something waited for her in this tunnel. Something old. Something powerful. Something tied to the silver heat inside her bones. The air shifted. The ash swirled. The dim glow of the sigils flickered behind her. And miles above the earth, the bells tolled a third time, slow, heavy, final. If she didn't move now, she wouldn't live long enough to see another sunrise. She pushed off the pillar, wiped the blood from her mouth, and limped forward, deeper into the darkness, toward the whisper she didn't understand but couldn't ignore. And in that breathless moment, with the storm raging above and the guards closing in, her voice softened inside the audience's mind. If you want to walk beside her through this fire, subscribe to Sophie's romance collections before they catch up to her. I felt the tremor in the air before I heard him, like the earth itself braced for something ancient, something it had learned to fear long before I was born. The torchlight in the corridor didn't flicker from breeze or draft, it dimmed as if devoured. And then the shadows shifted, peeling back from a silhouette they had been hiding. He stepped out of the gladiator tunnel as though he'd been carved out of its stone walls. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the deliberate slowness of a predator who never needed to hurry. His presence didn't fill the space, it commanded it, reshaped it, smothered the cold in my lungs with something hotter, darker, alive. The cursed Alpha. The monster mothers whispered about to frighten restless children. The executioner kings invoked before war. The beast the Roman priests once bound in chains blessed with spell fire. And he was looking at me. Not around me, not through me. At me. The chains wrapped around his wrists caught the torchlight and shimmered faintly, like molten silver cooled too quickly. Strange marks were etched along the metal, symbols I didn't recognize but felt in my bones. My uncle used to tell stories of spell-forged restraints made only for creatures who could not be contained by mortal hands. I never believed him. I believed now. He moved closer, slow, unhurried, like he knew exactly where I would run, and that I wouldn't. I should have backed away. Screamed. Bolted. But my feet didn't move, and my breath didn't obey me. It felt like the air between us thickened, drawing me toward him whether I wanted it or not. His eyes lifted to mine. God. They weren't eyes, they were storms held inside a gaze, gray and violent, haunted with memories I could almost feel brush against my skin. He looked like a man who had lost everything, survived anyway, and made survival a weapon sharp enough to cut the world. When he finally spoke, the darkness itself seemed to pause. Leora. My name. My real name, one I had never given to anyone in the arena, never spoken above a whisper since the night I was sold. My heart slammed against my ribs. He shouldn't know it. He shouldn't know anything. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. He stepped closer, and the air warmed, carrying heat that shouldn't have belonged in a cold stone corridor like this. It radiated from him, seeping into the places fear had frozen. How? I managed, breath thin, voice trembling despite my attempt to hide it. How do you know my name? His gaze didn't waver. It didn't soften either, but something inside it shifted, an emotion I couldn't name yet, something heavy, restrained, dangerous in how quietly it pulsed. I've known it since the night they chained you here, he said. Since the first time I heard you cry and tried not to. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. I never cried where anyone could see. I don't. Shoo. He lifted his hand, slowly, deliberately, and though the movement was gentle, the power behind it vibrated through the air like low thunder. Not threatening. Not demanding. But commanding all the same. He wasn't silencing me out of dominance. He was silencing me out of danger. Before I could ask why, he stepped closer, closing the distance between us in a single unhurried stride. And pressed me back against the stone wall. Not hard. Not harsh. Not possessive. Shielding. A pair of armored guards marched through the adjoining corridor, their steps echoing, torches sweeping light across the intersection. If I'd taken one more step forward, they would have seen me. His body blocked their view completely. I could feel his heat through the thin fabric clinging to my skin, an intense, enveloping warmth that drowned out the cold stone at my back. His breath brushed the side of my neck, sending shivers racing down my spine. Not from fear. From something I had no name for yet. I stayed perfectly still, because I didn't trust my voice not to shake or my legs not to give out. The guards passed. But he didn't move. He waited until their footsteps faded completely, then finally leaned back just enough to look at me again. Not far. Never far. Why? My voice cracked, fragile. Why did you help me? He exhaled slowly, and the warmth of it ghosted over my cheek. Something in his eyes softened, not in vulnerability, but in confession. A truth fighting its way to the surface. I've been watching your escape paths, he said quietly. A small breath punched out of me. For how long? Days. The word hit harder than any blow I'd ever taken in the arena. Why? My voice was barely a whisper. Why would you watch me? You don't even know me. His jaw clenched, but not in anger. In restraint. In something he didn't trust himself to unleash. Then he said, because you were never meant to die in chains. The corridor felt too small for the weight of that sentence. I stared at him, because the only other option was to close my eyes and fall apart. And I couldn't fall apart. Not with him so close. Not with his heat threading through my cold bones. Not with the way his presence made every buried instinct inside me rise to the surface. "You don't even know what I've done," I whispered. "I know what's been done to you," he answered. "And I know which one deserves punishment." Something inside me twisted, tight, sharp, painful in a way that felt like release. Like the first crack in a shell I had locked myself inside to survive. He stepped back a fraction, just enough for me to breathe without inhaling the shape of his chest rising and falling inches from my own. But even with space between us, the heat he carried clung to me. Like his presence had marked the air around me. "Look at me," he said. I did. His storm gray eyes held mine so fiercely I felt my pulse beat in my throat. Not because he willed it, but because something in me responded before thought could intervene. His gaze wasn't predatory. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't even hungry. It was aware. Deeply, dangerously aware. "As long as you walk these halls alone," he said, "they will scent fear on you. And they will use it." I swallowed hard. "And you won't?" A beat of silence. Thick. Heavy. Then. "I don't want your fear." The way he said it made my skin prickle. "What do you want?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't answer right away. He studied me, the way my chest rose and fell too quickly, the fresh bruises on my ribs, the rawness of my wrists, the tremble I tried to hide. He didn't stare at me like a man evaluating prey. He stared like someone memorizing the damage done to something he intended to protect. "I want you to survive," he finally said. I should have stepped away. Put distance between us. Regain whatever composure I could salvage. But I didn't move. Neither did he. The corridor lights flickered again, dancing over the markings on his chains. I could feel something radiating from them, faint, restrained, but undeniable. Power. Ancient and buried beneath layers of cursework, like a beast breathing under snow. I found my voice, fragile but steady. "You said you weren't supposed to know my name. Then how did you?" His jaw flexed again, and he looked away for the first time, toward the tunnel he had emerged from, toward the darkness beyond. Not avoiding the question. Considering how much of the truth I could survive hearing. When he finally looked back, the storms in his eyes had deepened. "Because your name," he said quietly, "was the first thing I heard when my curse changed." My breath caught. Changed? Into what? He shook his head once, slow, deliberate. "Another time. Not here." I stepped toward him without realizing I had moved, something inside me pulling, tightening, reaching for answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. He noticed. His breath hitched, not loud, not obvious, but enough for me to feel it ripple through the air between us. "You shouldn't be this close to me," he said, voice low. "Why?" I whispered. His chains glimmered faintly, reacting to something I didn't understand yet. "Because you don't know what I'm capable of. I'm not afraid of you." It surprised me how true it felt. He reached up slowly, not touching me, just lifting his hand near my cheek. The warmth of him brushed my skin without contact, and the sensation alone sent heat spiraling through me. "You should be," he said. Not threatening. Warning. Then, softer, heavier, but not for the reason you think. I swallowed hard. "Then what reason?" His chest rose and fell, slow, controlled, painfully measured. "Because the curse doesn't kill what I touch," he said. "It kills what I want." Every drop of heat in my body froze. He looked at me like the truth cost him something each time he revealed it. And yet he didn't look away. Didn't retreat. Didn't hide from the weight of what he'd said. "Then why?" My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Why stand this close to me?" "Because," he answered, "I am trying, very, very hard, to want something else." My pulse hammered so violently I felt it in my fingertips. "And is it working?" "No," his voice cracked like quiet thunder. "Not at all." I exhaled shakily, a sound too soft to be safe, but too sincere to swallow. And he reacted, his jaw tightening, his shoulders pulling back, the chain marks glimmering as if sensing the shift in him. He took a full step back, dragging the heat with him like a tide receding from my skin. The loss of it hurt more than I expected. "You need to leave this corridor," he said, tone regaining its edge of controlled restraint. "Guards rotate in minutes. If you're caught here, they won't take you to the arena, they'll take you somewhere worse." I swallowed again, grounding myself. "And what about you?" "I'm exactly where I need to be." I didn't understand what that meant, but I felt the truth in it. He turned slightly, muscles shifting beneath the battle-scarred skin, the chains at his wrists whispering like distant metal wind. "Leora." My heart stuttered. "Yes?" He held my gaze one last time, his voice low, dark, and carrying something that felt frighteningly close to promise. "I told you, you weren't meant to die in chains. Then. You were meant to break them." And before I could speak, before I could ask what he meant or why those words felt like prophecy burning behind my ribs, he slipped into the shadows he had come from, silent, impossible, and leaving behind a heat that refused to fade from my skin. The bathhouse received them like a forgotten ghost, its doors hanging crooked, marble ribs cracked open, moonlight spilling through the wounds in the ceiling. The scent of damp stone clung to the air. Water no longer filled the ancient pools. Only puddles remained, reflecting the cold silver of the sky. She stepped inside slowly, her steps uneven, her breathing shallow from the flight through the tunnels. He followed her without a sound, the cursed chains around his wrist faintly rattling like echoes of old magic. For a moment, the world paused. No guards. No bells. No marketplace howling for blood. Only the hollow quiet of a place that once held warmth, healing, and voices now long dead. She stopped beside a cracked pillar and finally let out the breath she had been holding since the chase began. It left her body in a shake, as though her bones themselves trembled. Her throat tightened. The moment safety found her, everything she had buried surged upward, a tide she could no longer dam. Her heart pounded against her ribs with the insistence of memory. She sank onto a cold slab of marble, tracing the faded etchings carved there by hands from another lifetime. He remained standing several steps away, watching her with that same unreadable intensity, his posture rigid, as if afraid that even the air he breathed might disturb her fragile calm. The moonlight cut across her face, revealing the thin trail of dried blood along her temple, the dirt on her cheek, the tension in her jaw. She pressed a palm against her chest, as though trying to hold herself together long enough to speak. But the memories rose first. They didn't ask permission. They never did. They came in flashes, sharp, vicious, unforgiving. A village at the outskirts of the empire. Smoke rising from the chimneys. The distant hum of the marketplace. Her mother's voice humming a lullaby she had never heard anywhere else. The scent of pine needles and wet soil after the rain. The comfort of a life that once felt ordinary. And then, shadows. The night the raiders came for shifters. The sound of hooves collided with her memory like thunder. Doors splintered. Men shouted demands. Mothers screamed for their children. Flames devoured thatched roofs. The sky went orange with terror. She remembered burying her face in her mother's cloak, trembling so violently she thought her bones would snap. Her mother hid her beneath the floorboards, whispering promises of safety she could not possibly guarantee. But a promise given in fear is still a promise, and she clung to it. Until the silver flame betrayed her. She remembered the sting of fear pushing through her small body, her fingertips burning, the glow leaking between the cracks of the wooden boards. A warmth she could never describe, a power she could not contain. Her mother's eyes widened, not with disgust, but with heartbreak, because she knew what the flame meant. Forbidden spark. A child who should never have been born. The Empire's priests arrived before dawn. Their white robes soaked in dew, carrying chains engraved with ancient glyphs. They whispered the prophecy she barely understood then, but it haunted her even now. The child of silver will unmake the throne. They dragged her from her home, her fingers still warm with the remnants of the flame. Her mother tried to fight, but 3 guards held her down as the high priest burned a sigil onto the child's wrist, an iron mark that sank cold into her skin and sealed her shift away. A brand for the Empire's most feared asset. Dangerous, they called her. Unstable, they insisted. Better used than left free. She had been 8 when they paraded her through the wolf market, her wrists bound, the scent of beasts and blood filling her lungs. Shifters snarled from behind cages. Merchants shouted prices. She remembered the auction platform, the chains, the way every pair of eyes dissected her as if she were a rare specimen, one they were eager to sell, but more eager to fear. Since that day, trust had become a luxury she refused to afford. She gripped her arms now, shaking as the memories bled together. He remained exactly where he stood, but she felt the weight of his gaze settling over her like a cloak, heavy, steady, grounding. His chest rose and fell in a slow, disciplined rhythm, as though fighting the urge to move closer. He didn't speak. He didn't reach for her. He didn't even breathe too loudly. But his presence was an anchor she hadn't expected to find. Her voice finally cracked through the silence. I didn't ask to remember any of that. The words trembled, raw and unguarded, an admission she would never have dared offer under any other circumstance. The Alpha's jaw clenched, the faintest sign of emotion carved across features meant for war. Memories don't ask permission. They take. She lifted her eyes to him. The moonlight revealed the scars tracing his forearms, the faint shimmer of spellwork along the chains tethered to his wrists, the exhaustion written in the shadows beneath his eyes. He looked like someone forged to endure, not someone meant to comfort. Yet here he was, choosing to stay. What do you know about memories? She whispered. He exhaled, a sound that carried years of weight. Enough to fear them. Enough to curse them. Enough to drown in them. His words stirred something inside her chest, something she had kept buried under layers of caution and hardened instinct. She tightened her grip on her arms, the sigil on her wrist throbbing faintly, reacting to the emotion she tried to suppress. He noticed. He noticed everything. His gaze dropped to the mark, and a flicker of recognition crossed his features. The priests didn't hold back on you. She laughed, a hollow, tired sound. Why would they? To them, I'm a weapon that shouldn't exist. He took one careful step closer. Not enough to crowd her. Just enough to let her know he was listening, and present. You're not a weapon, he said quietly. The Empire made you believe that. Her eyes stung. She blinked quickly, refusing to let tears fall, not in front of him, not in front of anyone. They didn't have to convince me, she murmured. My power did that on its own. He stopped walking. His entire body stilled. What power? He asked, voice low, too low. She swallowed hard. The silver flame. It comes when it wants to. It burns whatever it touches. It ruined everything. My village. My mother's life. My chance at being normal. He stared at her with something fierce, something burning, not with fear, but with realization. You're the spark the Empire's been hunting for, he said, almost to himself. The prophecy wasn't a rumor. She flinched. Don't call me that. Don't speak about destiny. It's just a curse. Nothing more. His eyes softened. Not in the gentle, romantic way, but in the way someone who has survived the same hell recognizes the truth beneath someone else's armor. You think you're cursed, he said. But you're not the only one carrying something heavy. She frowned. Your curse isn't like mine. He lifted his hands. The chains shimmered in the moonlight, each link etched with ancient seer script. They bound me with a spell so old the stones remember it. They say anyone I touch dies. Her breath caught. She had heard the stories. The cursed alpha who ended entire hunting parties by accident. The man the Empire used as both weapon and warning, The beast chained to prophecy in his own cruel way. He lowered his hands, careful not to step too close. I learned to stop reaching. To stop wanting. To stop touching anything that breathes. The confession carved a hollow ache in her chest. For the first time, she looked, truly looked, into his eyes. And she saw it. Not rage. Not coldness. Not the monster the Empire insisted he was. But the loneliness. The ache of a man who hadn't felt another's skin in years. She inhaled slowly. Then why did you come after me? His answer was immediate, unfiltered. Because you were running alone. The words struck her like a blow, heavy with meaning she couldn't yet untangle. She tightened her fingers against the cold marble, grounding herself as his voice sank deeper into the quiet. You think your power destroys, he continued. But I've seen destruction. You're not that. You're someone who survived everything they threw at you. Her heartbeat stuttered. Her chest tightened. And she hated how much she wanted to believe him. She turned her face away, trying to gather the pieces of her composure. I don't trust easily, she whispered. I don't expect you to, he replied. But you should know, you're not meant to carry this alone. A tremor passed through her shoulders, and she tried to hide it, but he saw. Of course he saw. He saw everything she tried to bury, everything she tried to pretend didn't hurt. You're trembling, he murmured. It's cold, she lied. His lips parted, a faint breath escaping, but he didn't call her out. Instead, he shifted his weight, his posture softening, not in weakness, but in understanding. It had been so long since anyone had understood her. So long since anyone had even seen her. She felt the pull between them again, quiet, insistent, dangerous. Like gravity whispering secrets. Like destiny humming beneath the air. But then she noticed something else. He was standing close enough that if she leaned forward, she could touch him. And he knew it. His fingers twitched at his sides, his breath faltered, and his gaze dipped for the smallest fraction of a second to her hand. Not with hunger. Not with fear. But with longing. He hadn't touched another soul in years. She curled her hand into a fist quickly, forcing distance back into the air. Don't, she whispered. He stiffened. I won't. Silence stretched. Raw. Heavy. Crackling. The bathhouse held them in its broken ribs, the moon watching from above, as if the sky itself waited to see what would happen next. Her memory settled painfully in her chest, no longer screaming, but simmering like coals that refused to die out completely. He finally spoke again, his voice lower than before. You asked who he was chasing you. She looked up at him, her pulse jumping. Yes. It wasn't just guards, he said. It was the priesthood. They know your power's waking. They've been watching you longer than you think. Her skin prickled. How long? He hesitated, not in uncertainty, but in choosing how to say something sharp without cutting her. Long enough for me to see it, he admitted. She stared at him, confused. See what? He held her gaze with a steadiness that made her pulse trip. You weren't meant to die in chains, he repeated softly. You were meant to break them. Her throat tightened. That's what you said in the tunnel. And I meant it. Another memory flickered, of the Alpha stepping out of the shadows, knowing her name, shielding her without touching her. He had been watching her escape paths. He had been waiting. For her. She felt emotion claw at her throat again, sharp and overwhelming. She tried to swallow it back, but it only pressed harder. He saw her struggling, and for the first time, something flickered across his expression, something close to regret. If I could take this burden from you, he murmured, I would. She shook her head slowly. You don't even know me. I know what it feels like, he said quietly, to be feared for something you never asked for. Her breath trembled. His voice softened further. I know what it feels like to be alone. Her chest ached, deeper now, almost painful. She blinked hard, trying to regain control, but her composure slipped again, cracking around the edges. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, as though afraid her insides might spill out if she relaxed even for a moment. But he didn't look away. He didn't retreat. He didn't flinch from her pain. He simply stayed. Present. Steady. Listening. And that was more dangerous than any prophecy. Because staying was the one thing no one else had ever done. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of everything, her past, her power, her fear, her instinct to run, and the quiet, terrifying instinct pulling her toward him. When she opened them again, he was still there. Still watching her. Still holding his distance. Still refusing to leave. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, the question cracking open the last fragile piece of her defenses. His answer came without hesitation, quiet, honest, and unbearably gentle. "Because you deserve someone who doesn't run from your fire." Her breath caught. The world stilled. The moonlight deepened. And in that quiet, ancient bathhouse, surrounded by ruin and memory, she felt something shift, something she wasn't ready for, something she didn't know how to name. But she knew this. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a weapon. And for the first time in years, she wasn't alone with her pain. The Alpha didn't move closer. He didn't reach for her. He didn't try to touch what was still trembling inside her. He simply stayed in the quiet with her. Letting her unravel. Letting her breathe. Letting her be. And for her, that was more dangerous than anything the Empire had ever done. The air grew colder as he guided me down the final slope of the aqueducts, our footsteps echoing against stone carved long before any of our line existed. Moisture clung to the walls in trembling beads, catching the faint blue glow of the moss that pulsed beneath our feet like veins of trapped starlight. He walked ahead of me with deliberate caution, shoulders tight, every muscle primed as if the darkness itself might lunge at us. I kept close, though each step pressed a heavier weight against my chest. The deeper we went, the more the air changed. It felt alive, charged. Humming with something ancient, something that seemed to recognize me before I recognized it. A slow vibration crawled across my skin, sliding down the length of my spine until it pulled at my lower back, warm and insistent, as if my body remembered what my mind refused to accept. He finally stopped at a stone arch half collapsed in the middle. Old vines clung to it, silver green and trembling like they breathed. Water trickled through the cracks, falling into a narrow channel that disappeared into the shadows ahead. "This is the last threshold," he murmured without turning. "After this, nothing natural protects us. Only the old ones watch." I swallowed hard. The old ones? He looked at me over his shoulder, eyes glowing faintly, steel caught in moonlight. "The wolves who walked before our bloodlines had names. The ones who carved the first moon marks into the world. They linger in places like this. They listen." Something about the way he said listen made my pulse stutter. He extended his hand. I hesitated only a breath before placing mine in his. The moment our palms met, a faint rush of heat surged through my fingers. Not desire. Recognition. Like something inside the earth tilted in acknowledgement. Together, we stepped through. The aqueduct opened into a vast hollow chamber, so wide the darkness swallowed the edges. The ceiling arched impossibly high, threaded with roots thick as tree trunks, twisting like frozen serpents. Sparks of blue light drifted lazily through the air, weightless, aimless, but aware, watching from every angle. The stone beneath my boots smoothed out into circular patterns, ancient glyphs I didn't recognize but somehow understood. The more I breathed, the stronger the pull became, guiding me forward, guiding me towards something I wasn't ready to name. He kept pace beside me but never tried to lead. For the first time since entering the aqueduct, he seemed to defer to me without words, as though even he felt the shift that rippled through the space. We reached the far wall where another arch opened, this one taller, carved from marble instead of stone. White marble, veined with faint silver lines that glowed like trapped moonfire. Beyond it lay a narrow tunnel, and from that tunnel drifted a faint wind, cool and sharp, carrying the scent of pine, night blossoms, and something older, something wild. I stepped through, breath catching. The world blossomed open. We stood at the edge of a vast forest, no sky above, only a dome of stone cracked open enough for thin shafts of silver light to spill through. Trees climbed impossibly high, their trunks wide as fortress towers, their leaves glowing with a faint luminescence. The ground shimmered with a low mist that curled around our ankles, parting before every step I took as if bowing. He noticed it first. "Do you see that?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The mist parted again, wide and fluid, forming a clear path straight into the forest's heart. His breath hitched. "It responds to you." A tremor ran through me. "No. It's just the air currents." But even I heard the desperation in my voice. He stepped closer, so close the heat of him wrapped around me. "Don't deny what's happening. Not here. Not now." I turned away before he could see the way his words rattled something deep in my center. My gaze locked onto the forest path, the way it seemed brighter now, as if waiting. "I don't know what it means," I whispered. "You will," he said softly. We moved deeper into the forest, the mist trailing behind us like a silent guardian. The trees leaned subtly inward as we passed, their glowing leaves rustling without any wind. The air thickened, charged with a presence that pressed against my ribs and made every breath feel like it carried a foreign heartbeat. After several minutes, a clearing approached, a perfect circle carved by time or something older than time. At its center stood the ruins of an altar, marble like the arch, but cracked, weathered, and half overtaken by roots. The sight froze the world beneath my feet. The altar was enormous, stretching the length of a small room. Ancient carvings covered its surface, wolves with eyes of flame, moons in phases I had never seen, shadows twisting into symbols that made my pulse stammer. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, like staring into the bones of forgotten gods. He stepped forward first, wiping dirt from one of the carvings. This is older than the Empire. Older than the first Pax. Some say this was where the ancients communed with the moon itself. I moved beside him, unable to stop myself from reaching out. My hand hovered over the center of the altar, over a symbol unlike the others, a spiral of interlocking lines, sharp, precise, and pulsing ever so faintly with silver light. "Don't touch it," he said sharply. But even as he spoke, the spiral flared brighter. And my palm descended. The instant my skin met the marble, the world convulsed. A burst of cold fire shot through my arm, racing up to my shoulder, down my spine, pooling in my chest with a heat so intense it stole my breath. The symbols across the altar ignited one by one, silver flames licking through the cracks, illuminating the entire clearing with blinding brilliance. I gasped and staggered back, but the altar clung to me with invisible threads, pulling images, sounds, whispers from somewhere beyond the living world. Wind spiraled around us, fierce and alive. The trees bent inward, their leaves trembling violently as the air filled with howls, soft at first, then rising in a cacophony that vibrated through bone. He grabbed my shoulders, trying to steady me, but even his strength trembled. "The spirits, they're waking." The wind deepened, swirling faster until it circled us like a storm. Shadows flickered through the light, massive shapes of wolves made from smoke and silver fire, their eyes burning with ancient memory. They paced around the altar, their gazes fixed on me, as if searching for something beneath my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the vision tore through. A wolf of pure silver fire padding through a battlefield, its fur crackling with molten moonlight. A man, no, an alpha, crowned in darkness, blood soaking his hands as shadows wrapped around him like chains. An empire of stone towers collapsing under a red-black sky, flames consuming everything, screams rising like smoke. And through it all, a single voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere, deep as earth and sharp as ice. "The one with the mark will awaken the sleeping moon." The words tore themselves from my throat before I knew I was speaking. The wind stopped. Dead silence fell. He stared at me like I had become something foreign, something impossible. His knees buckled, and he sank to the ground, not from weakness, but reverence. Shock. Recognition. You spoke the first line, he whispered. The prophecy's beginning. Only the chosen is meant to. I'm not chosen, I snapped, breath shaking, head spinning as the last of the vision melted away. I'm not, whatever you think I am. This is a mistake. It has to be. He rose slowly, eyes never leaving mine. There was no fear in them, only clarity, raw and certain. If it's a mistake, he said quietly, then why does the forest bow to you? The mist curled inward, swirling around my feet like a lover's touch. The glowing leaves above shifted, angling toward me, bathing my skin in silver. Even the wind brushed my cheek with something that felt disturbingly close to acknowledgement. I backed away from the altar, heart racing, throat tight. It's reacting to the altar. To the energy here. Not me. Everything here is reacting to you. His voice deepened, softened, as if he feared the truth might shatter me. You touched the altar and woke the spirits. You spoke what's been silent for centuries. You walked into this place and it shaped itself around you. Nothing about this is normal. I shook my head. No. I can't be part of this. I don't want to be part of this. But you already are. His words echoed through the clearing, through my bones, through whatever remained of the world I thought I understood. Then something shifted, the faintest, tiniest vibration beneath the altar. A pulse. I froze, sensing it before he did. Another pulse. Stronger. Like a heartbeat waking from centuries of sleep. He inhaled sharply. The altar, it's responding again. I stared at it, chest tight, as a faint symbol appeared across its surface, one that hadn't been there moments ago. A crescent split with a single line of flame. The same mark that had burned itself into my palm days ago. The same mark I'd been hiding since. My breath halted. He noticed instantly. Show me your hand. I hid it behind my back. No. Show me. His voice didn't rise. It didn't harden. But it left no room for escape. My fingers trembled as I slowly extended my hand between us. The mark glowed faintly beneath the skin, pulsing in time with the altar. Recognition dawned across his face like a storm breaking. It's you, he whispered. Moon above, it's really you. I never asked for this, I breathed. I never wanted this. I know. He stepped closer, hand gently cupping my face, his forehead nearly touching mine. Fate doesn't ask. It chooses. The altar brightened behind us, flooding the clearing with silver fire as the wolf spirits lifted their heads and howled as one, a sound that felt like a vow, a warning, and a welcome all at once. And deep inside me, something answered. Something I could no longer pretend wasn't real. Something that had been waiting. Waiting for this moment. For this place. For this awakening. He exhaled against my lips, shaking with awe. The sleeping moon stirs, because of you. And for the first time, I felt it, the subtle turning of destiny, cold and irrevocable, settling into my bones like a second heartbeat. I wasn't ready. But the forest no longer cared. Fate had already chosen. The clearing had barely settled into its unnatural silence when the forest changed again, not gently, not with the ancient reverence it had shown me before, but with a violent shudder that tore the air apart. The ground trembled beneath my boots, a sudden jolt so sharp it rattled the bones in my legs. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing, body turning instinctively toward the tree-line. He felt it before I did. Something wrong. Something approaching. The mist recoiled from the eastern edge of the clearing, shrinking in a single sweeping motion as if fleeing. The glowing leaves rustled in agitation, and the silver-lit bark of the massive trees cracked open with faint murmurs, warning the ancient way only the old forest understood. A sound rose beyond the trees. Not footsteps. Not wolves. Metal. Dozens of armored bodies moving in perfect formation, their pace precise, ruthless, disciplined. The rhythm of soldiers who had marched through countless conquests. Imperial wolf hunters, the Empire's most brutal creation. Trained to track, strip, and annihilate anything touched by moonlight. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. We're not alone. I didn't need the warning. The air sharpened with a metallic tang that tasted of forged iron and cold ritual. My throat tightened. They tracked us here? No, he growled. They were waiting for this. The trees tore apart before he finished speaking. Armored hunters spilled into the clearing in a wide crescent, their torches burning with unnatural black fire that cast no warmth, only a sickly glow that devoured the air around it. Their armor bore the imperial seal, an eagle pierced with a blade, and their helmets shone with runes carved for one purpose, to subdue wolves. But it wasn't the hunters that froze my blood. It was what followed. From the darkness behind them crawled shapes that should never have drawn breath. Wolves, but not wolves. Boars, but not boars. Creatures stitched from shadows and bone, their bodies warped by imperial dark craft, their eyes empty voids leaking trails of black smoke. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, muscle twisting over exposed bone, their breaths rattling with a death that didn't take. Shadow beasts. Imperial experiments. Aberrations built to hunt our kind without fear, without mercy, without an ounce of soul. The leading hunter raised his voice, the words scraping the air like serrated steel. By order of the High Tribunal, seize the marked girl. My stomach turned. Another hunter thrust a spear toward me, shouting, she must be returned to the auction block for the final ritual. Bring her alive. Final ritual. My blood ran cold. He snapped immediately, stepping between me and them, blocking their line of sight. You'll touch her over my corpse. The hunter's laugh cut through the air like a blade. That can be arranged. Bring him down. The beasts were released. They struck the earth in a thunderous wave, shadows surging like liquid night. The first lunged at him, a massive wolf corruption with ribs protruding through its flesh, its jaw distended far beyond anything natural. He met it head-on, shifting mid-movement, bones cracking, muscles tearing and reforming in a blur of violent grace. His claws sliced through the creature's throat, but instead of blood, black vapor hissed out. The beast didn't fall. It staggered, swallowed the wound, and lunged again, jaws snapping inches from my face before he slammed his entire weight into it, ripping it away from me with a feral snarl. Run, he barked. Now. I didn't run. I lifted my hand toward the altar's fading glow, desperate for the power that had surged through me moments ago. But the moment I reached for it, something inside me fractured. The mark on my palm flickered, silver one heartbeat, dead the next. Unstable, erratic, unpredictable. A surge of energy burst from my fingers in a violent arc, striking a nearby beast. It shrieked, its body tearing in half as the silver blast carved through it, but then the power sputtered, collapsing into painful static that stung my nerves and left my arm numb. I gasped. Not controlled. Not steady. Not enough. Another beast lunged at me. I stumbled back, and a hunter caught sight of the flicker in my hand. There, he shouted. She's destabilizing. If she triggers the awakening. And then another voice, this one panicked, terrified, piercing the frenzy. She will awaken the cursed one. The cursed one. The title hit the clearing like thunder. The hunters reacted instantly, shields rising, formation tightening, beasts surging with renewed ferocity. He heard it too. His head snapped toward me, and I saw it, the fear he had buried for years, the curse coiled beneath his skin, stirring, cracking, begging to rise. His eyes burned brighter, glowing with a dangerous, fractured brilliance. Don't listen to them, he rasped through shifting teeth. Don't you dare run toward them. But the hunters didn't wait for his warning. 3 of them advanced on me with chains of blackened silver, the metal humming with trapped curses drawn from Roman tombs. I raised my hand again, desperate. Nothing. A spark. A flicker. A useless, trembling pulse. Another chain snapped toward me. He moved first. He didn't shift fully. Not yet, but his body twisted in a half-form, muscles thickening, claws extending, teeth lengthening into razor-sharp points. His curse surged through him like wildfire, devouring his restraint. When he hit the hunters, the impact crushed armor like brittle bone. But every time he killed, the curse inside him swelled, feeding on violence, clawing at the edges of his sanity. The beasts closed in from the left, their shadows reaching for me like tendrils. I dodged one by instinct, the air slicing past my throat as its claws barely missed. Another surged from behind me, but before it reached me, he ripped it apart with brutal force, black vapor coating his arms like smoke ribbons. "Get back," he roared, voice torn between man and monster. "You need to run, now." I didn't back away. I stepped toward him. His eyes widened, wolf and man both recognizing the danger in what I was doing. A hunter saw the hesitation at his side and lunged, swinging a blade carved from obsidian bone. It sliced across his ribcage. He barely flinched. But the blade's runes ignited, consuming flesh around the wound with corrosive heat. He staggered, teeth grinding as his body fought the spreading burn. I felt my own panic surge. My power flared again, wild, chaotic, painful. Silver light burst from my palm, ricocheting off the altar's halo. It arced across the clearing, striking 3 hunters at once. Their armor shattered under the blast, bodies flung backward into the trees. But the moment the power left me, I dropped to my knees, the world spinning as if gravity had torn loose from its anchor. Too unstable. Too raw. Too new. He reached me in a blur, pulling me behind him as another wave of beasts launched themselves forward. His breath was ragged, uneven, every shift of his body shaking with strain. "You can't help me if you can't control it," he said through clenched teeth. "You need to go. I'm not leaving you." "You will." His voice cracked. "Because if you stay, I will lose control. The curse is already slipping. I can feel it." Another beast tore toward us, far larger than the others, its body a grotesque fusion of bear and wolf, symbols of imperial sorcery carved into its hide. It slammed into him with colossal force, driving him back into the altar. The marble cracked under the impact. He roared, claws raking across the beast's skull. The curse flared again. His eyes went fully feral. "No. Not like this." I tried to reach him, but hunters closed in again, forcing me back. One caught my arm, shackles clamping down before I could react. They burned with cold, black flame. I screamed, twisting, and my power burst from me in a violent, involuntary shockwave. The hunter's armor shattered. So did the ground beneath us. The altar split open with a sound like thunder ripping the sky. Fire, real fire, burst upward in a molten plume, swallowing the clearing in a rain of sparks. The shockwave launched me backward, slamming me into a crumbling pillar at the edge of the ruins. The impact stole my breath. Dust rained from above, and the world lurched sideways. Through the haze, I saw him turn toward me, saw the terror in his eyes at the sight of the collapsing ruins, saw the desperate instinct to reach me. But the flame surged higher, cutting him off. The fire split the clearing in two, a wall of blazing heat devouring everything in its path. Sparks ignited the ancient roots overhead, and burning debris crashed down between us. His voice tore through the roar of flames. "Run." I shook my head violently, struggling to stand. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to." His silhouette blurred through the shifting fire, fighting both beasts and his own curse. "They want you alive. They won't stop. If they take you, if they complete that ritual, you will awaken something that can't be controlled." A hunter dove at me from the side. I ducked, stumbled, ran. Another followed, shouting orders. The beasts pursued, black smoke trailing behind them like a plague. The forest seemed to pulse beneath my feet, path opening, guiding, urging. I ran. Not because I wanted to. Because there was no choice left. The ruins crashed behind me, pillars collapsing, fire consuming the clearing. The last thing I saw was him. Half-shifted, bleeding, surrounded, refusing to fall. And the last thing I heard was my own breath, ragged and shaking as the vow tore itself from my chest. I will not die caged again. She didn't stop running until the fire behind her had become a distant glow, swallowed by the twisted roots and rising mist of the ancient forest. The night pressed close, too close, its silence sharp enough to make her skin prickle. Every breath felt like it scraped through her throat, raw from smoke and fear and the weight of everything she had just left behind. Then something shifted in the air. A pull. A presence. She hadn't sensed him through sight or sound. She felt him, like gravity changing direction. Her heart paused, caught between hope and dread. A branch cracked behind her. She spun, breath held tight. And he stepped out of the shadows. He looked nothing like the force she last saw surrounded by beasts and fire. He looked more dangerous now, wounded, burned, half-shift lingering beneath the surface like a second heartbeat. His hair was soaked with sweat and ash, matted to his forehead. His skin glowed faintly beneath streaks of blood. His breathing was jagged, like every inhale carved at his ribs. But his eyes. His eyes found her with a despair so raw it bordered on relief. As though he'd crossed a graveyard of bodies just to stand here. As though he hadn't believed she would still be alive until this very moment. For a long heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he exhaled, the sound heavy, breaking, vulnerable. I followed your scent through the ruins. The words weren't thrown or growled. They were breathed, quiet, strained, carried with the weight of something he wasn't used to saying aloud. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until it released in a trembling shudder. The sight of him. The fact that he was still standing, still breathing, hit her with a wave of emotion that cracked something deep inside. You got out, she murmured, voice unsteady. His chest rose unevenly. I wasn't letting the forest take you from me. The forest. The empire. The curse. The prophecy. The beasts. The hunters. Everything had been closing in on her. But here, just him, moonlight, and the endless trembling of her limbs, she felt the world slow to a painful stillness. He stepped closer, but not recklessly. Each movement was deliberate, cautious, not for him, but for her. As though he feared startling her more than facing another pack of shadow-forged monsters. Why would you come after me? She asked softly, unable to hide the confusion tightening her voice. You were surrounded. You could have died. His expression didn't shift. If anything, the shadows around his eyes deepened, revealing a truth he had held long before she arrived. I've died a long time ago, he murmured. Tonight just reminded me. Her throat tightened. But you, he continued, voice dropping lower, rougher, you were running alone into a forest that devours everything. I wasn't losing you to that. She swallowed hard, breath trembling. You risked death by coming after me. He shook his head. No, he said quietly. I risk death every time I so much as stand near another living soul. His jaw clenched, anger at himself, not her. A confession lived in the sudden stillness between them. You know what happens if I touch someone, he said. You saw the curse in my bones tonight. It spreads when I fight. It spreads when I lose control. It spreads when someone gets too close. Then why, she whispered. Why come after me? Why push through all of that just to find me? His voice broke on the edges, gravel and truth and something far softer than either. I would rather die by your side, he said, than live cursed and alone. Silence fell, not empty, but full. Heavy. Breathless. The world seemed to tilt under her feet, not in fear this time, but because something inside her was changing faster than she could brace for it. A small clearing opened behind him. Soft grass, pale moonlight, a circle of stones that once held ancient rituals. He led her there wordlessly, his movements slow, protective, instinctive. He gestured for her to sit near a fallen log, and when she sank down, exhaustion hit her so abruptly she swayed. He lowered himself across from her, positioning himself between her and the forest's edge, watching the shadows as though expecting hunters to slither out of them at any moment. A fire flickered between them. Small, stolen from a smoldering branch, glowing with a gentle amber pulse. It cast just enough light to reveal the bruises along her arms, the soot along her jaw, the raw trembling of her fingers. His gaze traced every damage she'd endured, and though his face remained steady, his eyes darkened with a fury he tried, unsuccessfully, to bury. It wasn't the fury of a curse. It was the fury of someone who cared too much and too suddenly. He reached toward her. Then stopped himself before his hand fell halfway. The hesitation hung in the air like a shard suspended by a thread. She breathed, "You can't touch me." His voice lowered. "No. I can't." She looked at his hand, trembling with suppression. "Does it hurt you? Holding the curse back?" He let out a breath, slow and raw. "Every second." Their eyes met. "Then why do you stay?" she whispered. "Because it hurts worse to walk away." Her heartbeat quieted into something slow, fragile, weighted. The night wrapped around them like a cocoon, soft wind brushing fallen leaves, firelight dancing between their shadows. She didn't know how long she stayed silent. Minutes. Maybe hours. Time moved strangely under the moon. Finally, the truth pressed too heavy against her ribs, demanding release. "There's something you don't know," she said quietly. He lifted his eyes at once, sensing the shift in her tone. "Tell me." She swallowed, throat burning. "When I was taken from my village, the Empire didn't bring me straight to the auction block." His gaze sharpened. "What did they do?" "They tested me first," she whispered. "They wanted to know what kind of wolf I carried inside me. They wanted to see if the mark on my palm was a mistake or a prophecy." Her hands shook. The firelight trembled with her. "They tied me to a stone," she continued, voice barely holding together. "In front of the priests. In front of the soldiers. In front of the crowd." His breath caught. The first true crack in his composure. She forced the words out. "They tried to force a shift out of me. Torture. Ritual wounds. Spell work. Anything to make my wolf break loose." The fire popped, sparks jumping. "And I almost did." His head lifted, eyes fixed on her with absolute stillness. "I didn't shift fully," she whispered. "Only part of me changed. My bones. My voice. My hands. My eyes. It happened fast, so fast I barely remember it. And when it ended," her voice finally broke, "I killed them. The guards. All of them. I didn't mean to. I didn't even understand how I did it. And after that, the Empire didn't want to exile me. They wanted to use me." His jaw flexed, breath trembling with barely leashed rage. "To use your power," he murmured, finishing the sentence for her. "To weaponize whatever you are." Her eyes glistened. "They want me to break you," she whispered. "To use my shift to unlock the curse in you. They think I'm the key that makes you lose control." He stared at her with something tortured, something protective, something he had no name for. "That will never happen," he said fiercely. She shook her head, whispering, "You didn't see their faces. They were certain. They said if they could push my shift again, they would force you to your knees." He leaned closer, not touching, never touching, but drawing her into the gravity of his presence. "Listen to me," he breathed. "I don't kneel. Not to them. Not to curses. Not to fate. And never to you. Whatever power they think you carry, it is not meant to break me." Her breath stuttered. "It's meant to free me." The words hit her like a physical shock. She didn't move. He did. Slowly. Gently. Deliberately. He leaned in until the firelight trembled across both their faces, until she could feel the warmth of his breath ghosting against her cheek. His forehead hovered inches from hers, waiting, asking, aching. Her pulse hammered so hard it felt like it might tear through her skin. He whispered, "I found you in the ruins because something in me knew you were alive. Before the scent. Before the trail. Before my eyes could prove it." Her chest tightened. "Something in me," he continued, "answers to something in you." She leaned in, barely an inch, barely a breath, but enough. Enough for the air between them to thicken, hum, burn. Their foreheads touched. A soft, fragile pressure. His eyes slid shut. So did hers. The world went quiet. Only their breathing remained. Each inhale a confession. Each exhale a plea. The fire cracked. He lifted his hand slowly, trembling, tortured by instinct and curse. His fingers hovered near her cheek, so close the warmth brushed her skin without touching. She leaned into the ghost of his touch, breath-catching, wanting, terrified, aching. Then he pulled back. Not sharply. Not coldly. Not with rejection. With devastation. His hand dropped to his knee, fingers digging into the fabric of his torn clothing, knuckles white. He whispered, voice breaking open. "I can't touch you. Not yet. Not like this. Not when the curse snarls every time I breathe your name." She felt something inside her collapse in the softest, sharpest way. But she understood. She felt his restraint like a blade and a promise. The distance he forced between them was not rejection. It was protection. From his curse. From the Empire. From the destiny neither of them fully understood yet. He lifted his eyes again, and the truth in them stole the breath from her lungs. "Trust me," he said softly. "Or leave me." The fire cracked. The night held its breath. And she knew, without hesitation, without fear, without doubt. She wasn't going anywhere. The cages smelled of smoke, sweat, and iron. They slammed shut behind her with a sound that reverberated through every bone in her body, a reminder that the world had not yet forgiven her for surviving. The chains on her wrists bit into her skin, not just metal, but curses, old Roman inscriptions carved to suppress the silver flame pulsing inside her. She pressed her palms together, willing the fire to stay asleep. She had no control here. No way out. And every fiber of her being screamed that she needed it. The rival pack had brought her here with quiet, efficient cruelty. Their wolves prowled at the edges, silent shadows watching her, teeth bared. Their leader, draped in the sigils of the Empire, stood at the center of the arena of judgment, a Roman-style colosseum carved from black marble and history, stained with centuries of wolf blood and human cruelty alike. Her heart hammered. Every sound echoed, the distant drip of water from broken aqueducts above, the shuffle of armored feet, the faint hiss of the imprisoned shadows around her. The arena had seen fear, betrayal, and execution. Now it would witness her humiliation. She was dragged forward, her chains clinking like bells of doom. Every step burned her wrists, every breath was thick with iron and ash. And then, the whispers began. "Is she the one? She carries the mark of the silver flame. Return her to the Empire. She must be controlled." Her vision blurred, not from tears, though they threatened, but from the raw, suffocating weight of realization. They knew. They knew exactly who she was. The Council of Wolves waited at the far end of the arena. Roman columns carved with wolf motifs rose like skeletal fingers into the moonlit sky. The council members were dressed in ceremonial garb, half armor, half robes, a mix of tradition and intimidation. Their eyes bore into her like blades. She could feel their judgment slicing into her soul. The scroll was unrolled with a ceremonious flourish. Ancient Latin, twisted into a prophecy no one wanted to read aloud until now, glowed faintly in the torchlight. Her blood ran cold as the words were spoken. "She will awaken the cursed flame," intoned the eldest counselor, his voice brittle with age but sharp enough to pierce stone. "She will bring ruin to all who stand in the Empire's path. Her lineage is that of the silver flame, and her power will consume everything." Her chest tightened. Her wrists ached. Her body trembled, not from chains or exhaustion, but from the betrayal she felt blooming like venom in her veins. The Alpha appeared then, slipping through the shadows with his usual impossible grace. His eyes found hers instantly, the fire between them briefly reigniting, hope flaring like a fragile spark. But the council's eyes shifted to him. They questioned. They demanded. The weight of the choice pressed down on him, heavy and real. "Do you stand with her?" one counselor demanded, voice loud enough to echo through the empty seats. He faltered. Her throat went dry. Her pulse screamed in her ears. He shifted, hesitated, a flicker of indecision in his gaze. And that hesitation, it was enough. It shattered something inside her. She could not wait for permission, for guidance, for mercy. Her silver flame awoke. It was not the small flicker she had struggled to control. It was not a whisper. It roared, boiling from her chest, spilling from her veins, scorching the air around her. Chains snapped in a shower of sparks. The stone beneath her cracked. Smoke rose, curling like serpents around her arms. The council gasped. The rival pack retreated instinctively. Even the Alpha froze, fear and awe and despair colliding in his gaze. Her rage did not wait for understanding. It did not wait for reason. It surged. The arena trembled as silver fire coiled around her, licking at the columns, burning into the marble, a manifestation of every injustice, every betrayal, every whispered threat she had endured. Her eyes glowed with molten silver. Every word the council had spoken, every claim about prophecy, lineage, and doom, fueled the inferno inside her. "I am not a weapon for your games," she shouted, voice ringing with raw power, echoing off the blackened marble. "I am not your sacrifice. I am not your pawn. I am me." The ground shook. Wolves scattered. Beasts in shadow form fled the edges of the arena. Her chains melted into sparks, falling like ash at her feet. The air hummed with power, with fire, with ancient blood that recognized her as its heir. The Alpha moved then, faster than she could track, shifting fully into his cursed form. His claws swiped, carving a path through the smoke and shards of marble. He wanted to reach her, to hold her, to protect her, but he stopped. Not because he didn't care. Because he knew the magnitude of her awakening. Because this was hers, her fury, her power, her choice. The rival pack's leader stumbled backward, eyes wide in disbelief. She is impossible." "Yes," she whispered to the empty arena, to the night, to the Empire itself. "I am impossible." The flames rose higher, silver and white, reflecting off the broken columns, illuminating every detail of her face twisted with fury, pain, and liberation. Her power was no longer a flicker. It was a tidal wave, and it was hers. And as the arena trembled beneath the surge of her energy, she realized one truth: she was no longer running from fear. She was running toward it. Toward vengeance. Toward freedom. Toward destiny. Toward him. Because even through the haze of fire and the roar of her own power, she felt his presence, watching, waiting, bound to her in ways neither curse nor empire could sever. But for now, she ran. The flames crackled, illuminating the ruins of her chains, the shattered columns, the twisted bodies of the Imperial enforcers. Her silver fire left a trail that marked her passage, a declaration that no cage, no empire, no prophecy could hold her again. The night embraced her as she moved. Every step a promise. Every breath a defiance. "I will not die caged," she murmured, voice hoarse but unbroken. And the Empire, the Council, the Hunters, the rival packs, witnessed what they had always feared. She had claimed herself. Her fire, her rage, her power, it belonged to her. And the Alpha, standing at the edge of the arena, knew he would follow her anywhere, even if it meant walking into the collapse of worlds, even if it meant standing beside a storm he could not control. For the first time in centuries, neither of them were prisoners. They were a force. And the world would feel it. The night pulsed with the echo of her liberation. The moon, silver and watchful, bore witness. The prophecy had been twisted, yes. Manipulated. Used as a weapon. But the silver flame, her birthright, would not be bent. She sprinted into the forest, every fiber of her being alive with burning fury, with freedom, with the knowledge that the world had not yet seen the worst of her power. And somewhere behind her, the cursed Alpha followed, claws cutting paths through roots and underbrush, heart racing with equal measures of fear and devotion, knowing that soon, their fates would collide in ways even the prophecy could not have predicted. She ran, but she also rose. Not just from the ruins of the arena. But from every betrayal, every whisper, every broken promise that had chained her before. She was fire. She was wrath. She was silver. And she would never again kneel. The world would bend or break under the storm she carried. And for the first time, she welcomed it. The night had grown heavy with ash and blood, the scent of burned oak and smoke lingering like a memory that refused to fade. The arena of judgment, once silent after her storming escape, now roared with a new menace. From the far end, torches flared brighter, casting long shadows over the twisted stone and broken marble. The enemy had not given up. They were preparing the crucible. A colossal Roman contraption of steel and bone, carved with ancient runes and bound with chains that hummed with cruel magic. Its purpose was clear: drain the wolf essence from her body, strip her of everything she was, leave only a husk. Her silver flame rose in response, coiling along her spine, erupting from her chest in shards of molten light. It crowned her, a halo of raw, living energy that danced along her shoulders, arcing through her hair, blinding in its intensity. The chains that had once tried to bind her trembled, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with her pulse. And then he arrived. The Alpha, cursed, feared, the nightmare whispered about in wolf and human alike, broke through the arena gates. The wood splintered under his claws, the metal buckled. His form was terrifying and magnificent. Eyes as black as midnight glared out from beneath a mask of fur and fury, veins glowing like molten iron beneath his skin. Every step shook the earth, every breath drew fire from the air. He was not here as a protector or a lover. He was here as a storm unleashed, a force that no ritual, no empire, no mortal hand could command. Her eyes met his, and the world narrowed to the space between them. She had feared him once, had trembled at the thought of his touch. Now, fear was gone. It had been replaced with something sharper, hotter, unyielding. The silver flame at her spine surged, responding to his presence, to the unspoken bond that tied them together through blood, fire, and destiny. "I am not your sacrifice," she shouted, voice carrying over the roar of the ritual, the crack of the earth, the hiss of ancient runes awakening. "I am your reckoning." The crucible glowed beneath the hands of the priests, veins of dark magic pulsing in time with the flickering torches. But when her declaration rang out, the glow faltered. The metal cracked, faintly at first, then with a shriek that made the ears of all in the arena bleed. He moved to her side, claws digging into stone, his cursed form radiating a protective, merciless heat. His presence alone was a challenge to the Empire's authority. Together, they were unstoppable. The first strike came without warning. A priest raised the crucible's lever, chanting incantations that had been honed over centuries to control the cursed wolves. Energy shot toward her, tendrils of black and green, thick with malice and ancient cruelty. But she did not falter. She raised her hands, silver fire spiraling like serpents around her, meeting the magic head-on. It exploded. Light and shadow clashed, sparks flying, the air burning. The ground beneath them split, ancient marble fracturing as if the arena itself was tearing free from centuries of imprisonment. The statues carved in memory of old wolf gods, long dormant and forgotten, stirred. stone cracked. Eyes flickered with light. The air hummed with power that had not been touched in hundreds of years. The Alpha roared, and the sound was a hurricane, vibrating the bones of the arena. He lashed out, claws ripping through the crucible, tearing chains, splintering metal, scattering the priests like ragdolls. Each movement was deliberate, precise, terrifying, yet beautiful, a dance of rage and devotion. She followed, silver flame wrapping around her hands, her eyes shining brighter than the torches, brighter than the fire in the night sky. Her power responded to the Alpha, to the fury of their combined will, to the unspoken promise that neither would bow, neither would break. They reached the altar together. Priests fell back, shields useless against the storm of raw power. She raised her hands and released it all, the fire that had been suppressed, chained, feared. It tore through the altar, consuming wood, stone, and runes alike, sending shards flying, leaving nothing but molten streaks across the marble. Sparks erupted into the night, lighting the sky with silver streaks that mirrored the blaze in her chest. She turned to the Alpha, chest heaving, flames licking the edges of her hair. He met her gaze, the black in his eyes burning like coals, veins glowing brighter in response to her power. They stood together, not as captive and cursed, not as fugitive and protector, but as two forces, primal and unstoppable, defying the world. And then the shadow came. The earth shivered. The wind whispered a wordless warning. From the highest tower of the empire, from the heart of the arena itself, darkness descended, a wolf unlike any she had ever faced. It was massive, impossibly large, wings of shadow folding against its back, teeth that gleamed like obsidian, eyes that burned with the same darkness the empire had tried to harness. The emperor himself had become host to this shadow wolf deity, a creature of malice and ancient hunger, centuries in the making, centuries in waiting. But she did not falter. Her fire surged again, hotter, wilder, unchained. Every fiber of her being screamed, every muscle coiled with anticipation. She was no longer prey. She was the predator. She was silver flame, she was fury, she was the force that the empire had underestimated, dismissed, and feared. The Alpha stepped forward, claws digging into the cracked stone, eyes locking with hers. The bond between them pulsed, cursed, fierce, eternal. He did not speak. He did not need to. Their synchronization, their shared instinct, was more powerful than any command or prophecy. "I am not your sacrifice," she said again, voice ringing across the shattered arena, carrying over the roar of the shadow wolf, the crack of the earth, the sparks of silver fire. "I am your reckoning." The shadow wolf lunged. The Alpha met it, claws tearing, his cursed form eclipsing the night. She followed, leaping, twisting, her silver flames wrapping around the beast's limbs, scorching, blinding, resisting the dark that sought to consume them. They moved as one. A tempest of black and silver, fire and shadow, rage and devotion, terror and love. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Ancient statues, now fully awakened, shook free from the rubble, eyes blazing with the memory of the old world. Wolves carved in stone broke apart, their forms shimmering into ghostly guardians. They swirled around her, drawn to her power, protective, obedient, responding to the pulse of her bloodline, the surge of her destiny. Her fire coiled around the Emperor Shadow Wolf like a living thing, constricting, clawing, consuming. The Alpha struck, a blur of black fur and raw power, ripping through the dark essence that had possessed the throne. She stepped closer, rising higher on the silver flame that crowned her, reaching deeper than she ever had into her lineage, into the blood of the silver flame. With a scream that tore through the night, she unleashed it, everything. The power, the fire, the fury, the destiny. The arena, the forest, the ruins, the statues, the air itself, shook under it. She became unstoppable. And the Alpha, beside her, cursed, powerful, relentless, roared in unison. The crucible was gone. The altar was ash. The priests scattered. The shadow wolf hesitated, sensing the power of a force it had not anticipated, a force it could not bend. She lifted her head to the night sky, chest heaving, silver fire licking the edges of her hair. "I am not your sacrifice." she screamed, louder, sharper, higher. I am not yours. I am not anyone's. I am free. The Alpha's hand brushed hers, fingertips grazing, and she did not recoil. The cursed touch did not strike, not yet. But their bond pulsed with a force that could shake mountains, part oceans, consume empires. The Emperor's shadow wolf howled, wings unfurling, eyes burning, but the night itself bent around her. The air rippled. Trees groaned. The earth cracked further. The arena seemed to bow, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. She was fire. She was silver. She was vengeance. She was power. And as she turned to face the Alpha, eyes alight with unquenchable flame, she whispered, "Together, we end this." And the ground beneath the Empire shivered with a promise they had long ignored, a reckoning had arrived. The air hung heavy, thick with smoke and the scent of scorched earth, as the remnants of the Empire's ritual smoldered behind them. Torches burned low, guttering in the wind that whispered through the broken columns of the arena of judgment. Ash drifted down like falling snow, coating hair, shoulders, and the silver flame that still lingered around her wrists. She could feel it pulsing, alive, echoing the rhythm of her heart, each beat demanding attention, each surge reminding her that she had survived, that she had risen, that she had claimed herself. He stood there, just beyond the haze, claws still twitching from the battle, his black eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The curse that had always radiated from him, the death he carried in his touch, was flickering, uncertain, destabilized by the storm of her power. It was a fragile thing, the boundary between life and death, fear and desire, destruction and salvation. And yet, despite centuries of warning etched into every whisper of his legend, despite the prophecy that had branded him untouchable, he reached for her. Their hands met, a tentative touch at first, trembling with disbelief. His claws grazed her skin but did not pierce, did not harm, and she gasped at the sensation, the warmth, the pulse, the undeniable connection that burned between them. For a moment, the world ceased. The ruin behind them. The fallen columns, the cracked marble, the smoke curling from the remains of the crucible, faded into nothing more than a distant echo. There was only this. Only the heat of his presence, the pull of his essence, the ache in her chest that screamed for him even as her mind tried to resist. She studied him, the cursed Alpha who should have been death incarnate, and found in his eyes a vulnerability she had never seen before. The fury, the storms, the centuries of isolation and pain. They were all there, layered beneath the surface, yet he had extended a hand. Not as predator, not as executioner, but as someone willing to stand beside her, unafraid of the fire she carried, unafraid of the chaos that had become her. "Would you have feared me too," she whispered, voice raw with awe and lingering trepidation, "if you didn't know my name?" The words hung between them, fragile and sharp, as if the world itself paused to listen. He did not answer immediately. His breath was uneven, ragged from battle, from emotion, from the intensity of the moment. His gaze softened, and for the first time, he allowed the space between them to collapse. The ground beneath their feet trembled faintly, as though the earth itself held its breath. Even the silver flame coiling along her spine responded to this pause, flickering in quiet waves of recognition, of acceptance. The world had seen fear, destruction, and war, but in this instant, it saw something else. A connection. A bond forged in fire and shadow, in blood and destiny, in the aftermath of a world that had tried to cage them both. The Alpha's fingers tightened slightly around hers, careful, deliberate, testing, and the subtle warmth against her skin ignited something she had not known she could feel. Trust. Hope. A quiet, insistent power that rose not from magic or silver flame, but from the knowledge that someone had seen her completely, every scar, every curse, every spark. And had chosen to stay. She leaned forward just slightly, drawn by gravity older than reason, by instinct older than fear. Her lips hovered close, unbroken by hesitation, and she realized that nothing in the Empire's prophecies, nothing in the warnings of priests, nothing in the centuries of whispered terror, could prepare her for this sensation, safety. She was safe in his presence. She was seen. She was wanted. And then the world exhaled. The wind stirred the ash around them, sending it swirling in silver-dusted spirals that glimmered in the moonlight. The ruins whispered, carrying fragments of memory, of battle, of the sacrifices and betrayals that had led to this moment. And as their hands remained joined, the Alpha's curse flickering but restrained, the weight of destiny settled like a mantle across her shoulders. She was not a pawn. She was not a weapon. She was fire, she was silver, she was alive. If this story lit something inside you, a spark that refuses to fade, a fire you feel in your chest as you walk through battles, betrayals, and passion alongside her, then follow the flame. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where every tale burns deeper than the last, and every hero and heroine will take you through a storm, hand in hand, heart to heart, where nothing is ever simple, and every moment leaves its mark. The ash settled, the silver flame dimmed to a gentle glow, but the tension lingered, electric and potent. They pulled back just slightly, breathing the same air, feeling the tremor of life still vibrating through the ruins. And for a heartbeat, it seemed they could simply stand there, hand in hand, and let the world mend around them. But the earth had not finished speaking. The forest beyond the arena, dark and shadowed, silent but alive, whispered warnings. Branches shivered, roots shifted, and the ground itself rumbled beneath their feet. A low, resonant vibration traveled through stone, ash, and bone alike, a heartbeat of a power older than empires, older than curses, older than prophecy. A voice carried on the wind, barely audible but undeniable, curling through the trees, slipping through the ruins like smoke. She is not the only one born of fire. The words struck her like cold iron. She glanced at the Alpha, their fingers still entwined, his eyes narrowing as he sensed it too, the premonition, the threat, the truth lurking beyond their immediate victory. The shadows shifted in response, dense and alive, carrying the promise of another storm. Another cursed Alpha. Another prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. Another war, older and darker than any they had faced tonight, already stirring its claws. Yet in that moment, amidst the tremors, the ash, and the whispering forest, they did not falter. Her silver flame flared once more, not in fear, not in rage, but in resolve. It pulsed along her spine like a drumbeat, steady, unwavering. She had survived the Empire's cruelty, the betrayal of council and rival pack, the storm of her own uncontrolled power. And now she was ready for whatever lay ahead. The Alpha stepped closer, tilting his head, sensing her resolve, matching it with the pulse of his own cursed power. Together, they moved forward, the forest swallowing them in shadows and moonlight. Branches parted before them, as if acknowledging the fire and fury walking into their midst. The whispering voice lingered, a shadow of threat, an omen, a promise, another Alpha, another trial, another battle. She tightened her grip on his hand, drawing strength not from prophecy, not from power, but from the certainty that she was no longer alone. He was beside her, cursed and powerful, a storm to match her fire. The night held its breath as they disappeared into the forest. The air thrummed with possibility, with danger, with the unbroken thread of destiny that would not rest until it had been fulfilled. And though the ruins of the arena behind them glowed faintly with the last embers of silver flame, they knew the truth, the war was only beginning. The moon peered down, silver and watchful, illuminating two figures walking into darkness, into challenge, into fate itself. And the world waited, trembling, for the fire yet to come. Another Alpha, another prophecy, another storm rising from the shadows, the story was far from over. She was not a sacrifice. She was not alone. She was the flame, the reckoning, and the future yet unwritten. The forest swallowed them, the earth rumbled beneath, and the wind whispered once more, carrying the echo of fire, destiny, and a storm that had only just begun. The first chapter of their reckoning had ended. The next was waiting, fierce, relentless, inevitable.